It started in 2011 when I had sabbatical. And so my sabbatical proposal had called for me to actually write two new editions of 2 paper books. So we have this Python programming and context book that David Random and I wrote, and then we had our data structures textbook published by Franklin Beadle that we were going to update. And so that was going to be and then I was also supposed to learn how to program iOS, because I was going to teach an iOS programming class. So as I began to kind of work on writing the text for the new chapters and thinking about how to present the new material that we wanted to present in these textbooks, it was sort of this confluence of the iPad and these things that kept driving me to think about how we would write a textbook for the iPad, right? I mean, it was classic, right? I did not want to write text. I wanted to hack during my sabbatical. So I kept trying to come up with ways to not have to write text and actually get to code. And
right. I like that. It's kind of like how, I mean, I very much sympathize with this. I think we're both professors that, love coding and hacking, and however we can structure our projects so that we can build stuff rather than write stuff. We do. So this was 2011, the academic year, 2011. Yeah. So you started, actually, you contacted me, I think, in the summer of 2011. And I think you were just starting to look into, interactive things with Python and stuff. And then that's how you came upon my Python tutor site with these visualizations and stuff. Right.
Yeah. Yep. So that was one major component. And then the other major component was the Sculpt project. Which is a Python interpreter written in JavaScript.
Yeah, so tell me how you came upon the Sculpt project to kind of, this is the origins, right? We have the CodeLens thing, which is the Python tutor visualizer, and then we have the Sculpt JavaScript implementation. So how did you come about that and take that on?
So, right, I mean, I really wanted to do this interactive textbook, and to me, one of the primary things was, we wanted to encourage students to be able to mess around with the examples that we gave them. Right, and so for my mind, one of the design constraints that I had at that point was to think, well, I really want somebody to be able to do this at 30,000 feet when they're not connected to the internet. And so I don't know, I was just kind of Googling around, and I ran across this project called Sculpt, which was maintained by a guy by the name of Scott Graham, who was in Vancouver at the time working for a game company, I think. And so he had written this whole thing on his own, this kind of core of a Python interpreter, all written in JavaScript. And it was like, the light bulb went off over my head, and I got really excited. I'm like, oh, this is it. This is, now we can do these examples in Python in the book. And so, I mean, it was pretty undocumented. Right. Typical kind of open source, one-person project, a few other people messing around with it. Pretty undocumented. And it was missing one big thing, which was a kind of the Turtle Graphics library, because we were aiming this for beginners. And so kind of my dive into that was to figure out how to add a Turtle Graphics module to Sculpt. And I learned a lot about how it worked by trying to build in a new module for it.
When you were assessing the technology for it, did you feel like even when you started with Sculpt as is, it was good enough as a subset of Python for beginners that you could build off of it, or was it too prototype quality back then?
No, I thought it was good enough at the time that for CS1, CS2 type of activities, it was perfectly well suited for doing that. No way would you do lots of advanced stuff. But in fact, even just this summer, for example, we finally got things like descriptors to work, and properties. So we've made some great progress over the years on that. But none of that more advanced kind of stuff existed then. But it was pretty stable. He had this giant test suite of 400 and some tests that you'd run Sculpt and it would generate the output, and run real Python, compare the output from real Python. And for all the basic kind of stuff that you want to teach beginners, it was great. So
cool. So did you ever think about this was 2011, did you think about consider just teaching in JavaScript because that would give you the in the browser for free, or did you always want to stick with something like Python?
Never. Yeah, I teaching beginners into their first, JavaScript as a first language, I think is problematic.
Right. It is definitely quirky, and you also had a lot of materials in Python. Obviously, there's a lot of momentum with Python and
right. Yep.
Open education and stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, even then, like what you had and the Sculpt stuff. What I quickly realized was that nobody in their right mind would write a textbook, right away using kind of this in its raw form, because you'd spend all your time, hand coding all of these examples. So my next step was to try to think about, well, what sort of authoring environment could we glom onto that would make it easy to write some macros that would generate, all the JavaScript scaffolding that you need in order to, to have a simple editor with a run button that you write a little Python and you click the button and you run it. Or in your case, the same thing with the Python tutor. We wanted to have a really simple way of, well, here's an example I want to show, and I want people to be able to step through it and visualize all the steps. And so that kind of led me down the path of looking at some of these markup languages like Markdown, restructured text, and that led to Sphinx. And ultimately, that's where I kind of landed on was Sphinx, because it's got a really robust kind of system for developing extensions to the restructured text markup language.
I'm going to switch over to share my screen now because I want to preview a little bit of the Runestone stuff. But I don't want to spend too much time on it because I don't want to have this just be a tech talk about Runestone. You see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm just at the overview. So let's see, I'll scroll through and I guess you can talk about some of these stuff in brief. So we have this here.
Yeah. So there's the active code. That was the name that we came up with. So this is the Sculpt, the stuff running behind the scenes. You click the run button, it runs it. Now, if you make a change, just add another number to that list or whatever there. Click the run button again. Now, yeah. So this.
Oh, there's deltas. Ah.
Yep.
Cool.
So this is a brand new thing that actually at SIGC last spring, Paul Resnick and I spent a couple of afternoons hacking this together instead of attending sessions. And so I'm really excited to see how this is going to fly this fall when classes start up again and everybody starts using this. But I think this has a huge amount of potential when students know they've got this kind of timeline of what they've done right in their little browsing environment.
Yeah, this is great. And this is kind of a cheap version control as well, right? So they don't be as afraid to experiment because they know they can go back.
Yep.
This is really cool. And then we'll click the CodeLens thing here.
Yeah, now cross my fingers. Yep, okay, good, that works. And so then, I like this because we can now make anything kind of visible in CodeLens, which is just the name that we gave to the directive in the Runestone toolkit for your Python tutor stuff.
Cool. So we have this. So this was like we were talking about earlier, both the combination of Sculpt, which turned into active code, and Python tutor, which turned to CodeLens. That was the technology sort of basis that gave you that inception moment in 2011. Though I wanted something like this in Dubai text.
Yep.
You didn't want to just write a bunch of PDFs.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you didn't want to just put a PDF on the iPad. And then what is in here?
So here's the good old Turtle Graphics module, just showing showing the Sierpinski triangle.
Cool. You have the code right here, and it's all Python, and you can tweak it and run it just like.
Yep.
So this is cool because this gets into some of the media computation stuff, right? That Mark Gosdell was talking about. That you can use this to control graphics, and you can imagine audio and stuff also. So there's a tool. There's just a bit of styling. So this is the Python tutor thing, some styling, and then there's also quiz questions you can put.
Right. Yeah, and then I was at the ACM Awards banquet. I think that the spring of 2012, I want to say. And so I had run, and at that awards banquet, I had run into Mark Guzdial. And so we were both at the gala accepting awards that year. And so I started to talk to Mark about this project, which, basically then was just the active code stuff and the CodeLens stuff. And, he got really excited and he said, oh, this is exactly what we've been looking for. And so we talked and we came up with this list of other components that we thought would be cool to add. And so that's kind of where we see the multiple choice stuff. And then Mark's wife, Barb Erickson, is actually, this Parsons problem thing is really cool. And she's actually basing her PhD research around these Parsons problems.
Right. So the idea behind these is you can actually just drag stuff so that you don't have to worry about syntax errors. So that's a lower cognitive load for beginners, but they can get the structure. And then do you indent also? Yeah, you can.
Yep. So you can see the little indent line there. Yeah.
Very cool.
And so that kind of gives you a little visual indication of where you might want to indent things. Yeah.
Very cool. And there's some active learning exercises where it asks you, I think.
Right. Yeah. So we can go into the CodeLens stream and ask the user some questions, either to say, what's the value of this variable going to be? Or we can, like in this if statement, it'll ask the user to say, okay, what's the next line that'll get executed once we once we stop here? So kind of a way of making them really think about what's going on.
And then there's just other sorts of interactive widgets with
right. Yep.
Let's see.
This one I really like, this clickable area one.
Oh, what is this?
Because a lot of times on exams, what I'll do for CS1 or CS2 is I'll say, here's some code. Circle all the assignment statements, or circle all the variables that are integers, or things like those kind of questions. So I think in this one, this one is actually just click on all the assignment statements, right? And
cool.
And there's distractors in there. You can click on other stuff too if you want.
I see. Other things are clickable.
Yep. And some things aren't.
Exam. So there's standard exam questions, embedded videos, other media. Yeah, so it's really neat and there's tests. So this is a cool kind of, and there's comments. Wow, there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, when I checked, a year ago, it was just a basic foundation of, it kind of started with this kernel of an idea of what if we could run Python in the browser and run some kind of embedded visualization. So the Python tutor thing, you could, embedding it, the canned examples, you don't need a server, right? But if you actually want to run live, you need to run a server.
Right, yep.
Right, so you can still fulfill your being on an airplane, or more practically like being in an area without good internet, right? If you're overseas, in the developing world, you don't have good internet, you can package all of this up into a CD-ROM or or binary.
Yep.
Very cool. Yeah, this is a cool overview of everything. So then how did the thing, talk about kind of growth, right? I mean, this is 2011, 2012, you're building the foundation, it's just you. So what's happened in the intervening years? So,
I mean, the growth has been just really surprising, because the fall of 2012 started out just using it for we had 3 sections of intro computer science that fall. And so David and I used it for those 3 sections. So it was about 60 or 80 Luther students that were running on it that fall. And then we just sort of decided, okay, let's just kind of open this up. And so we put it out on interactivepython.org. And I don't know, I must have sent out a message to somebody saying, here's this thing. And sure enough, people started to adopt it. And since that fall, we've seen growth by about 1,000 to 2,000 students per day every semester. So this last spring, we were up to 13,000 students a day that were using it, kind of all around the world, mostly English-speaking countries, although it's been translated into Ukrainian and a couple of other Chinese languages, I think I've seen out there. And so it's in the United States, it's really been adopted by, I want to say 200 to 300 high schools are using it, and probably 300 to 400 colleges and universities. So it's just kind of spread by word of mouth.
Right. And
is
how do
kind
you
of
make it easy
the
for a new
thing.
school to adopt it? I mean, there's an account system where I'm going to set up an installation in my school or have an account for my school and stuff, or are they just using the open website just like everyone
Right.
else?
Yeah, I mean, so that was kind of the biggest, another big aha moment in the kind of history of this project was, I started out thinking, all right, we've got these kind of authoring tools now based on restructured text, and we've got this server, and hey, they're both open source, so all anybody has to do is make a fork of it, and they can run their own server, and they can build their own books, and everything will be great. And it didn't really work out that way, because it turns out, first of all, most professors don't want to mess around with having to run a server and deal with all the complexities of setting up a project like this Runestone server that we have. I always go back to your command-line bullshittery blog post, because it is so true. For working with undergrad research assistants or even other college professors who want to run some open source project. There's just so much overhead to getting something like
because they're busy teaching and running their class. They're not
right.
They're not uber hacker types oftentimes, because they don't bother with that.
Yeah, they just want a book that works.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of led to this idea of, well, maybe we can do kind of textbook as a service approach. And so that's kind of how Runestone kind of morphed into interactivepython.org. And so people can go there now. They can sign up for an account. And if they want to be an instructor for a course, they can go to the instructors page. They can build a course and by choosing their starting point. And now we've got like 6 different books that they can use as starting points, all kind of written with the Runestone interactive tools. And it'll build a static copy of this textbook and kind of squirrel it off into a corner, so that students that are in their course that they've just created will always kind of just go to this static page, and then all the other interactive stuff happens through API calls and exchanging JSON information in the background.
Right. So there's this kind of going from, I guess, the seed of one piece of technology or 1 or 2 pieces of technology to building an authoring environment around it, to building these textbooks. And now the latest chapter is kind of platform as a service thing for this digital textbook platform. And how, how much, that must be a lot of code. And how does that development effort working out? I mean, that's a lot of work.
It is. I mean, what's kind of cool about it is, I worked with Mark, and a couple years ago got an NSF grant to fund 2 students each summer. So we're on the 2nd out of 3 years of that. And so, basically 90% of the development happens during the summer months. And so I've got 2 students that are working with me and have been working with me the last couple summers. The summer before that, I got a SIG-C special projects grant to support 1 student. So, I mean, it's a great undergrad research project, right? If you've got some training in some of the web technologies, you can kind of jump in and help with development on all kinds of stuff in this on this platform. So the development definitely happens during the summer, and I have a lot of help with students. This summer we really kicked it up a notch. We kind of had a hack week at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where about 14 of us gathered for a week, and we really kind of talked a lot about, all right, where does this need to go, and what are some of the big features that we really need to be developing now over this summer and the next summer. And so we made a lot of progress, definitely made a lot of progress that week, and that's really helped focus our efforts for this year, for the summer months.
Yeah, that's really great. I mean, I think it's also a motivating project for students too, because they can see that, I think students get that educational impact and appeal, and they're like, oh, if I build this thing, there's already all these people using it, so, and they obviously need authoring or account management or stuff. I can help build this piece of a bigger thing that it's not like some random prototype you're going to throw away. It's something that actually people need. Right.
And they know that it's going to be ongoing. And for most of the students, it's actually something that they've now, they've used. They've, as a as a first or second year student, they've been through the book, so they kind of understand it, and and they like it, I think, for the most part. And so, they think it's a worthy endeavor. So.
Cool. So are these mostly students at your school, or have you been able to get students from other universities to help out as well, more remotely?
Some remotely. So Paul Resnick has some grad students at the University of Michigan, and so they've been doing some work on it. And then Barb Erickson and Mark Gusdile, they've had several students now who've gone through and either gotten a master's or there's I think first PhD is almost out the door. Brianna Morrison will be close to graduating, and so she's used the tools a lot and been very influential in kind of helping figure out some directions for them. And then along the way, they've got other students who are also helping kind of with core development and adding new features. So yeah, it's really kind of starting to develop a real community feel around it.
Yeah, I mean, this is what, that's why I'm interested in talking about this, because, it is really hard and rare for academic software projects to be long-lived, right? And you've already crossed a lot of these precipices to the point where the hope is in the coming years with you and Paul and Mark and other folks that and with computing education research becoming more and more prominent, that they actually feel like both that they can get funding and students to work on developing the platform and also doing pedagogical research on it, right? A lot of the stuff that we've seen on your site are being used by these researchers for their pedagogical questions and their curriculum-based questions too. So it's kind of this nice synergistic thing. It's not like you're just some guy building tools. You're very in tune with the research and the educational community as well.
Right. Yeah, that was a lesson that I think I really took away from my own PhD advisors at the University of Minnesota. Was that we had the project there was the GroupLens project, and the cool takeaway from that was not only did they have this movie lens website that allowed people to kind of rate movies and get movie recommendations through collaborative filtering, but John and Joe figured out early on that they were also collecting this valuable data set, and so they made this data set available to other researchers as kind of okay, here's a test data set that you can use to develop your own algorithms, that you can use when you're want to try things out and write papers. And so I kind of, as this whole Runestone thing was developing, I think that was somehow in the back of my mind of thinking, okay, yes, we're offering a great service for teaching introductory programming, but we've also kind of got this platform going for doing pedagogical research.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. That even though obviously the domains and time is really different, it's that's the kind of cool thing about these ideas, that they kind of transfer across domains, right? So the GroupLens group in Minnesota and your stuff and your group stuff are very different domains, but it's the same idea. If we want to, how do we build critical mass around a software project in academia, keep it going, have research being built off of it, have sharing the data, have grad students going through, because that's ultimately, what funds a lot of ongoing software work is kind of research output, right? And if you're getting NSF grants, there are some infrastructure grants now, and you can get some small things, but really, they're funding larger scale research projects.
Yep. Yeah, that's what we're finding.
Yeah, another analogy is to the IPython Jupyter folks, right? So they're kind of, they have fewer, I guess, core faculty on their team, because Fernando Perez is a research scientist, and they have, they're kind of riding off of the Python and data science movement that schools like Berkeley and UW and places have large amounts of funding recently for data science, and IPython and Jupyter are really integral to that, so they can use some of that funding to keep developing their work and stuff. I mean, I view the Runestone stuff as a bit more academic, focus on teaching and research, and right. Jupyter stuff has more of an industry influence as well, because data scientists and industry are using it, so they can kind of pitch in some funding for the team to keep it going. But it is it is a real challenge.
Yeah, and the IPython stuff is I mean, the Jupyter notebooks, IPython, I've been using it long enough that I'm still getting used to calling it Jupyter. But there's some good synergies between what we're doing with Runestone and a lot of what you can do in notebooks as well. And so in fact, I use Jupyter Notebooks for some of my upper level classes. So
Right.
I really like teaching that way.
Yeah, and thinking about the synergy is really interesting. Well, because their design points obviously are a lot different than yours. They started off as a practicing scientist notebook rather than primarily for education. And you all start out primarily for education, but they do kind of converge, right? There are more people putting up these literate notebooks of data science courses and stuff, but they're not as flexible as you all are. But they're they're adding widgets into it, and it's all just an open web platform that you can put widgets in.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, there's a Jupyter kernel for Sculpt. So if you don't want to have your Python run on a server in the background, you can actually use Sculpt as one of the kernels for a notebook and have it just run all in the browser that way.
Cool. So we're wrapping up pretty soon. It's hitting on 30 minutes. So what do you, I guess, to kind of reflect on final thoughts, what are your thoughts about the next 3 to 5 years of this project? So you're the department chair now?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So as the department chair,
it's not a huge department, so it's it's a cool sounding title, I guess.
But still a lot of but as someone who is you, Mark, and Paul are all fairly senior faculty now with a lot of faculty professor type responsibilities. How what kind of vision do you have for moving Runestone or actually have Python forward, both for yourselves and for kind of keeping the team going? Because it is like I was saying, the theme here is it is a challenge. It's admirable to do, and it's awesome, but it is constantly a challenge to keep these projects going longer term. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I mean, this summer was really kind of all about the instructor interface. So starting this weekend, we'll be rolling out a kind of an alpha/beta version of a brand new instructor interface with lots of great visualizations for teachers to look at student progress and kind of keep tabs on what their students are doing, and just kind of a lot of mechanics, better grading interface and stuff like that. And then I think the next phase is we've got a whole bunch of improvements in the hopper for kind of the core Runestone components. So we've got this cool little visualizer tool that not like macro level visualization like what you do with Python Tutor, but it's actually a little thing that Al Swigert wrote a couple years ago, and it allows you to visualize how Python evaluates just an expression.
Oh yeah, the micro level. Yeah, that's really important. Well, yeah.
And so and it's really cool. And I think that having that as a yet another tool in the arsenal for teaching students about how Python works and how evaluation happens, that's one example of something that I think will be really, really awesome. And then we'd really love to add sound. And then the really big thing, right, is kind of the analytics and the machine learning kind of can we move this forward to an intelligent kind of tutoring system? Because we've certainly collected vast amounts of data, and it just keeps piling up in a database. And so I am now teaching two data science courses. So I'm sharpening up my skills in both visualization and machine learning. And so I'm really kind of getting excited about where we might go in terms of analyzing and bringing to bear all this kind of data that we've been collecting now since 2011 on how students are learning, and figure out if there's some really cool things that we can do there.
Awesome.
So
yeah, well, it's
just great. One of those projects that every time your to-do list shrinks by 3 things, it grows by 7 things.
That's right. Well, you always have and you're all. I mean, the cool thing about one of the really nice things about your environment is you're in a position where that's well aligned with your kind of both your educational and your research mission, right? It's like this is something that you have momentum on and you want to keep building up and such. So that's an awesome success story.
So yeah, and like I said, it's kind of a growing community. Just today, I got an email from another professor at another college who has written a component that allows and he's written a textbook to go with it that uses ClojureScript. So he's got this really cool little textbook now, written with the Runestone tools, and he's added Clojure on top of it. So, you know, I would invite anyone listening to this who has an interest to, you know, feel free to get in touch and join in, because we've got plenty of work to do, and we're happy to and eager to continue to grow the community. Awesome. This is great. I mean, it's a great note to end on. I will put some notes in the website for the show, you know, with links to, you know, the Runestone stuff and some examples and kind of invitation to get started and stuff. So thank you so much, Brad. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Philip. It's been great.